2016 committee. Going to have her come up for a couple minutes and talk about that committee as we get underway here. And just a thought. Hello, Harold. Nice to see you. Come on. I forgot my thought. So without further ado, from the 2016 PAC, we have Sarah De La Cerda. I got it right. To speak up for a couple minutes.
And we are going to shift gears here. And I want to say to Governor Gilmore, I want to say thank you very much for spending a few minutes with GraniteGrok.
My pleasure to be here with GraniteGrok.
Yes. We are the leading conservative libertarian blog site. Our point of view, just to let you know, is that we very much support the NHGOP platform, which is a fairly conservative one, New Hampshire Constitution and the U.S. Constitution. And we go after pretty much anybody who varies from that, be they Democrat or Republican, which we see a lot of nowadays.
You've mentioned yourself, the leadership in Washington doesn't seem to be able to cut the size of government or the taxes, and that's something that you seem to be very keen to do.
One of the things you just said during your speech, because I was listening, is to fund the government to do the things that it's supposed to do. And I think that is the topic among the grassroots, that we see too often government doing far too much at the federal level. And we just don't know what to do with it, because we do see, as you mentioned, the EPA, we see the IRS, the Interior Department, Bureau of Land Management. I mean, I could go on and on and on with unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats making the decisions. It's almost as if the progressives have just about reached their endpoint, the administrative state. What can you tell our listeners and the conservatives here in New Hampshire? What is it that you would do to stop that from happening, as well as would you be willing to devolve power from the presidency back to the Congress so that it will actually do all the small little details that they've just fluffed off to the administrative branch?
I don't think the Congress does its job. And over the last decades, they've really deferred too much to the administration, to the powerful executive. And we need to get a better balance. The founders never intended it to be that way. Second of all, I remember when I was in law school. When I was in law school, they were teaching us about tax law. And they were saying, well, you know, if we add some taxes here, then people will react to that and they will do something differently. Here's the truth. Americans do react to tax law. And that means that you can begin to control people's conduct through raising and reducing taxes. Taxation is not for that. Taxation is supposed to finance the government. And our real challenge is to determine among the American people what should be financed and what should not be financed. There are values that we have. We have clean water and clean air values, but that doesn't mean the Environmental Protection Agency should be empowered to control everything that we do through that type of approach.
Do you think federalism is in grave danger right now? The whole idea of it was the states that created the federal central government. What do you say when I think that the states are in huge danger of having that relationship flip-flop around?
It is, because that's where the money is. The money is in the big taxation is through federal taxation. And so all that money gets into Washington and they can call the tune on the states. But I want everybody to know I was the governor of a state. I was the governor of the state of Virginia, a large state, but we behave the same way the other 49 states do. We have education issues, we have transportation issues, we have prisons that we have to deal with, we have all kinds of challenges, higher education in colleges, and we have to deal with those kinds of issues. But I believe that there's too much residing in the federal government right now, and the states have to play their appropriate role.
Mike?
Yeah, how do the states get their power back? Because right now we've had a century of creeping central government where they've acquired both the means and the administration to effectively push the states around. Beginning in 1913, the federal government figured out how to steal the money from the people, both by taxing it and printing it, so they could use that to coerce the states to oppress the people. I mean, to put it bluntly. And it keeps getting worse and worse. It's going to take a revolution, not necessarily a bloody one, but the states have to be able to stand up concertedly and say, you know what, we want our money and our power back. at the same time as as we need to put people in the federal government that are somehow willing to give back. Bureaucracies don't like to give back. We've created a monster.
Well, we've also got plenty of law that supports that monster exactly that way. So we have to be thoughtful about the fact that we're going to have some legislative changes, and that means that you're going to have a bubbling up from underneath among the public, which of course is exactly what GraniteGrok is trying to do, is to build support among the general population, particularly in New Hampshire, in order to cause a change in direction.
Exactly, both by the candidates that we support, by the issues that we shine spotlights on, and so on. Sorry, Skip.
Yeah. One of the things that I served as a budget committee member in my little hamlet, and there were always those that said, well, this is a great idea. We can get this free grant. We can get money from the state. We can get money from the feds, most of it from the feds lately. And it's always that allure of that free money. It doesn't cost our taxpayers anything, including, in one case, $365,000 for a sidewalk that didn't go anywhere. Oh, but it looks good and it was free.
It was free because the federal government paid for it or the state government paid for it. Yeah, I get it.
The question is...
I'll tell you a story in a minute.
Yep. My question is, both as president and as a former governor, why do politicians love that free money? Why is it that they talk about the free money, but they never publicly talk about the strings attached part of it? And I guess most of that is, as you as a former governor, because I'm quite sure that Virginia took a lot of money from the feds with those strings attached that oftentimes forced state governments to spend far more than what they would originally have done.
Let's illustrate exactly that by talking for a moment about Medicaid and the desire for Medicaid expansion. And what the federal government has said is, well, now, if you will expand Medicaid and put more of your people under free health care in your state, we'll pay 80% or 90% for a while. And the state then is saying, the liberals in the state are saying, well, it's free. The state's going to pay for it, and we're just going to pay a little portion of it. And I found myself saying, you mean 90 cents on the dollar is paid for by the federal taxpayer and 10% is paid for by the Virginia taxpayer? Boy, those Americans sure are stupid, aren't they?
Well, I think
that's the problem. That Virginians and New Hampshireans, they're all Americans. They're paying that big federal bill.
Exactly. Well, I mean, Virginia, going back a long way, has had a history of telling the federal government, "Thou shalt not," back to the Virginia and Kentucky resolutions. But we don't even have to go back that far. One of the ways I think that we can turn this around is to point out it's not just the taxation, because you can't all be donor states. Some of you's paying. All of us are paying. But that's not all, folks. Even when the money looks free, it's deflating the dollar in your pocket. Because, every dollar that they can't tax, which is an increasing amount of them, they have to print. And when they print them, it shrinks the dollar in your pocket. The only thing that's keeping the dollar afloat is the fact that foreigners have more trouble with their own currency than we have. Otherwise, there would be nowhere for those dollars to go.
Yeah. As president, as long as Mike talked about foreign dollars and currencies, obviously one of the things that has just happened is the Export-Import Bank just went dead. Whether they'll unwind and liquidate is another story, or whether they're going to hope for a Hail Mary. What is your stance on the XM?
I can hear the creaking of the coffin lid already, Skip. It's going to take a lot to keep that dead.
Yeah. What was your take on that?
I want to approach it from a different direction than I think you're approaching it. Trade is essential for the well-being of the American people.
Right.
We have to be in a position to trade with foreign countries successfully. In fact, I just read a book about Hitler, and his goal was, in fact, to take over all of the economies of Europe, Africa, South America, and then make a deal with the Japanese to hem us in the Pacific and ultimately shrink us down to where we couldn't trade, where we couldn't communicate, we make things, we couldn't export things, we couldn't import things. So the rule I just want to tell you is America has to be a major trading state. Now, that means that we have to be in a position to trade on an equal basis with people who are actually adversaries. The Chinese control their government. They control their trade in a way that we don't in the United States. If the Exim Bank can get us on a level playing field, if they'll give up their government support, we'll give up ours.
But isn't that a little bit a part of mercantilism, and that on one hand, and a lot of crony capitalism on the other? Because one of the biggest companies in the world, Boeing, has been the vast recipient of all of that money. And the argument certainly reached here in New Hampshire, where Kelly Ayotte is now running for re-election, and she supported it. But I look at that, we are not pro-business as far as GraniteGrok is concerned, but what we are is free market, where I don't care what size you are or what your connections are, but it should be a level playing field for everybody, and not just getting special deals just because the CEOs know all of the political people. And that's why I'm a little concerned when people say, well, let's do this. And certainly during the Obama administration, we've seen crony capitalism just explode. So that's another question. Well, with that growth in crony capitalism, how do we make it fair for the little guys on Main Street or the folks that are regional manufacturers to be able to say, we don't have to depend on politics anymore. We just have to compete in the marketplace. What would you do as president to make that happen?
Well, what the whole thrust of what I'm doing in my potential race for the presidency is about economic growth and development. Now, you could say, well, you're going to have cronies that are going to get the benefit of building businesses or something of that nature. What my focus is on making sure that it's such a robust economy, there are more jobs for people to get. And then wages will go up automatically. The danger you've got today is less what I think you're describing than the fact that the left is going to take over the government and try to impose wages and equalize wages. That's what Hillary Clinton is talking about right now. That's just warmed over Marxist thought, and we can't have that. That's what we have to fight and make sure that we do have free markets. We have encourage businesses, growth, investment, and employ people. You got to remember, Skip, that when a company succeeds and they pay a dividend, first of all, individual people are investing and risking their money, and second of all, you have to have people earning wages. That's what America's all about.
Okay, a follow-on question. We've seen the EPA, Department of Energy, and a slew of other folks trying to act as venture capitalists as with the government. Solyndra is the unhappy poster child for that. Would you get the government out of being in a venture capital mode to determining winners and losers?
Yeah, I don't think the taxpayers' money should be risked on venture capital like that, although we did in Virginia, for example, encourage businesses to come in, and we did, in fact, provide some tax benefits and grants to do that. But as governor, I always said, look, we're just not giving money away to people. I'm going to demand that we know and have a contract in place that says that the taxpayer is going to recover his money, get it back, and, in fact, make the profit that they're entitled to.
How successful were you in doing that? When you use
pretty good money, pretty good.
What was your % success of actually having those companies actually live up to the terms of the contract? Because we've seen, we write about it on an irregular basis, but we do, of companies that go, take the money, and then they fold up.
And I agree. I think that's pretty disgusting. So when I was governor, we had a choice. We either could just not encourage people to come to Virginia, or we could carefully manage and control it. I chose to carefully manage and control it and build up jobs in Virginia and create opportunities for people in Virginia. But you're absolutely right. When people then fold up and move out and go somewhere else, that's disgusting. It ought to be illegal. We ought to be building in penalties. We ought to make sure that we can capture those penalties. And if that happens, that's wrong and it's disgusting, and it is a crime on the taxpayer.
So what was your percentage success?
Yeah, I guess we never actually looked at. I never asked what the percentage was, but I know that the bad incidents were so rare that when they happened, I noticed them. Most of the time, we succeeded. But I want to come back to this point one more time, Skip. I don't want you to miss it. We made darn sure that we had an agreement in place and safeguards to make sure we recaptured our money.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of states do that. We've done that here in New Hampshire. But when a company goes belly up, there's nothing to recapture. It's not just a case where they come here, they get the benefits, and then they go somewhere else. You're looking at it at New York right now, where their program to bring people in has just totally tanked.
The danger is that the governor, in order to look good, will take a risk on a bad risk, and I never let him do that.
Okay.
Well, that's fair enough. I'm not sure I'm a huge fan of managing the process as opposed to encouraging it by simply lowering taxes and regulations and tort laws and just saying, "Come on in, boys. The water's friendly. The sharks have been caged." I get the idea. You want people to come in, but when Skip was asking about measuring success, I mean, it's either on how much taxes were paid in versus how much taxes were deferred in the beginning. And the other question is how many jobs were created versus the promises, because a lot of these folks will make very rosy promises about job growth, and then they end up not hiring, and you end up with egg on your face.
I think you're right to focus on this.
Yeah.
I think you're right to focus on this. Any governor who just does this willy-nilly and doesn't pay attention to whether they're keeping their word and keeping their promises, actually creating the jobs, that would not be a good governor.
Yeah, so that's why I ask, is it possible that how could we find out how your term went in Virginia? And I'm not saying this as a gotcha kind of question. We're only asking you the same questions we ask anybody. You can ask any person in this room
I'm
what we do.
I'm not taking it as a gotcha.
But
I was governor from 98 to 2002. I imagine that stuff probably exists within the budgetary information on open source.
Right,
We'll take a look.
Yeah,
Please do. Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
Let me switch subjects. You've talked about taxes. You've talked about trying to make the economy, put a fire under its butt.
You bet.
What are your other? Give me three more of your top other issues.
The second issue is the national security, and I'm very alarmed by this. I think this is the principal matter that we really need to be talking about. My signature issue has been the economic free market growth of the United States economy, getting people back to work and getting higher wages. But the other issue that I think is imperative is to be thinking about the national security of the United States. We have had a drawback type of approach over the last number of years, and the result of that is the world is exploding. And we are not prepared for the challenges that we're facing right now. We're just not. The Army is reducing its numbers. We don't have enough combat brigades with the Marines. The Navy doesn't have enough ships. And as a result of that, it's not just the terrorist problem, although I want to tell you a few of my credentials. It's also the real challenge we're seeing from Russia, China, Iran, and other nation states as well. But I want your listeners to be aware of this. I am a veteran of the United States Army Intelligence. I was in Europe during the Cold War. I chaired the National Commission on Homeland Security for the United States for 5 years. I was the governor of Virginia during the 9/11 attack. I've extensively traveled worldwide. My degree is in Russian area studies and foreign policy. And I'm here to tell you that we are not prepared for the challenges that are still ahead of us, and we have to do something. And that means we've got to build up our military again in order to send a political message around the world that we're back, we're growing. Now, I am not an interventionist. I want to have strength for peace, not strength for war, and that's an important distinction.
Okay, we're still running between $300 and $500 billion deficit every single year. My question comes down to, where is the money going to come from? Yes, if we get a free economy, which takes several years to catch up to all the mess that's been created, but where will that money come from, those billions of dollars, where 3/4 of the national budget now is going to redistribution?
That's right, and that is a problem. And I don't think that we ought to be having 3/4 of the budget going to redistribution. I don't believe in redistribution. I think that it's harmful to the freedom of the American people and to the free market and the free economy and the free business community and free enterprise. I believe that. And, the challenge you're going to have is a multi-pronged attack. You got to control spending. You got to do something to get back in charge of your own money, because right now we're just a redistributionist type of program that's going from one place to the other, and we have to get back in control of that.
Mike or Steve?
No, that's fine. Those are very good security credentials, but balancing the budget in order to be able to fund the military is the thing.
Well,
even if we can just flatline the entitlements for a while, so that the revenues can catch up, we'd be ahead of where we are now. And I'm not suggesting that I'm happy with the current level of redistribution, but there's ways to make it taper off in real terms that nobody really feels the pain, especially if more and more of the ones that are currently entitled are getting jobs instead.
We agree.
Yeah.
We need to keep control of the growth of this entitlement society.
Yeah.
But the answer at the end of the day is we have to grow the economy. You know the economy is only growing at 2%. The historical rate is 3.2. And the truth is my goal is to get us growing above that, closer to 4. And you can do it. With the tax cut proposals I put on the table right now, carefully thought through, well publicized, you can get the growth of this economy up to 4 or 5%. You have to do that to recapture what we lost. So right now we're seeing tax policies in place that deliberately discourages the growth of the economy. Those things have to be changed.
You're right. I know
that's where the revenue comes from, is the point.
Yeah, and good tax rates actually generate more revenue.
Yes.
So I noticed that you mentioned the 10, 15, 25% tax rates, which I seem to remember is what we had under Reagan after his reform. Would you prefer that to, for example, a flat tax at some intermediate rate with big deductibles?
Yeah, I think that a flat tax is not politically possible in America. But a reform that I have proposed, overarching, is possible. 10, 15, 25%, set the rates in such a way that people get a tax cut. That gets more money back into the pockets of the people who earned it. Number two, we have the highest tax rate in the world today for corporations. That's why people are going overseas. They have to in order to be competitive.
Tax inversion of the week. I mean, they
exactly.
keep on happening.
You got to buy that down to a 15% rate, which you can do in this country if you eliminate, as you say, the crony capitalism and the special deductions and special credits. You can buy the rate down for everybody to 15%, and I propose combining big and small businesses together that way. Third, you get rid of the death tax. Fourth, you put tax reforms in place that encourage investment.
Yep.
And you do those things, and you'll explode it. You'll explode the economy, get more jobs. I want to remind you that when Kennedy did it in the 60s, we got great growth. When Reagan did it in the 80s, we got great growth. These things work, but they're just against the conventional thinking of the left in America. We have to restore people's faith in themselves that we can have a real dynamic economy again.
Okay, let me go off on a topic completely orthogonal. And I know our time is starting to run short, but obviously one of the things that's in the news today is the gay marriage decision out of the Supreme Court, and balancing that against the First Amendment right to free right to expression. I see a very bad collision going on, and I see once again an enumerated right in the Constitution that is not going to end up well for a lot of Bible-believing Christians who are not bigots, who are not racist, not homophobes, but are going to be almost pushed out of the public square on any kind of cry of discrimination. So we hear that some of these civil decisions are, well, we're not going to go after the religious institutions, but what about the individual for whom that First Amendment was actually written for? We are losing that.
Oh, thank you.
So where do you stand on this whole topic?
Well, tell me what your question is.
What should take precedence? What do you do about those people of faith who are going to be hounded out of the public square, and like that Oregon bakery where they are basically going to go homeless and slapped with a gag order, not by a real judge, but a mere bureaucratic administrative law judge? I mean, this is not quite what should be happening.
I think it's a real challenge, and here's why. The issue, the gay issue, is being piggybacked onto the race issue, and as a result of that, under the current law, it's going to be very challenging to make this thing balance out. I don't think that people of faith ought to be forced by the government to do anything commercially. But I think that we're headed for non-discrimination laws that may, in fact, create a problem for that.
So what would you do about that as president?
As president, I would try to strike the right balance. I'm not interested in sending a message of anger or dislike to anybody.
What is that right balance?
Well, I think the right balance is trying to be as respectful of people's genuine religious beliefs as possible. When it crosses over into discrimination against people, I don't think in modern America today you're going to be able to do that.
Okay.
So what would you call discrimination? I know you've got to go. They're here looking for you. Well, what would you consider to be discrimination?
I think that if you conduct yourself differently with people based on sexual orientation, I think that's not going to work in modern America anymore.
Okay. If people want to get a hold of you, talk to your campaign, how would they do so, Governor?
I have a web page. It's growthpact.us. I have not yet announced. I'll be doing that, I expect, in August. But today, people can reach me through growthpact.us.
Well, very good. I want to say thank you very much for taking more than a few minutes with GraniteGrok.
My pleasure. Thank you, John.
Greatly appreciated, Governor.
Thank you.
Grok TV.